You want strong? You gotta tell them the truth. And you shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. How many people want to be free? How many people want to be free? Come on, how many in this place want to be free? Well, the only way to really be free, I gotta know the truth. And truth is the word. And the word is Jesus. In the beginning was the word of God, the word was God. It's the truth that makes one free. Because the time will come when we will not listen to the true teaching. But we'll find. You ever see people change in churches so much? I ain't wrong. But whose fault is that? She can't make you grow up. He gives you, listen, you that have wives that cook well, or mothers or whoever, they can cook the best meals, but if you don't, you got a lot of folks now, they come to church every day. They come to sing good, when time for the preaching.
I hear a lot about how these men prayed and the exercise of their faith. What made you think? Why do you think that they had such a heart to build such a strong foundation for a church?
Well, I was very young when I started hearing about the founders, and I was going to Ocala. One thing I do remember is that each one of them always had a message that talked about what they believed and how they really came together and prayed and thought of what they needed to do. But they were always saying what God had told them and how they had prayed and even how they named the church.
One Lord, one faith, one baptism, one church, 100 years. When Daddy John Bright, Bishop Aaron Matthews, Evangelist Nathaniel Scipio, and Executive Secretary Hubert Stedman gathered in the little North Florida shack, one could only wonder if they imagined this body would still be here. Yes, the church that was built on faith is 100 years old and has never had a church split. Through the Great Depression, 2 world wars, and racial strife, this great body has stood the test of time. Why? Because of so many spectacular leaders. The Church of God by Faith has had only 3 bishops over these 100 great years. The first was Bishop Aaron Matthews.
Bishop Aaron Matthews acted as if when he preached, he seemed as though he was walking in that environment as he preached the gospel.
Bishop Aaron Matthews, a biblical scholar. I mean, when it comes to the Bible, you couldn't beat him with that. He was dead on. I mean, he had a verse for everything.
He was just common, very spiritual, very common. And when he would come to Jacksonville to see his son, Deacon Aaron Matthews Jr., I would drive him around on the district from church to church. But this is the kind of fellow he was, very loving man. And preached very seldom. They had a lot of movement. They stood behind the podium, but their word was very profound.
I was living with my aunt, Mother Lily Davis, who was a great woman in the Lord, and she kept Bishop Aaron Matthews' personal business. So I was interning in St. Augustine, Florida, and I got home from school that afternoon. She called me and told me, say, we got to go to Yalaha. That's where the bishop lived. She said, will you drive me there? I said, sure, Lily, I'll take you. He was deathly ill, and he needed her there right away. So I drove her up there, and we got up there, and Bishop was lying in the bed under about 3 blankets. In that room, these were some of the last people that saw him alive. In that room with Bishop Aaron Matthews, one of the founders of the church, was his wife, Mother Nancy Matthews, his son, Deacon Aaron Matthews, his other son, Bishop W.W. Matthews, Aunt Lily, who I drove up there, and me. We were some of the last people that saw him alive. And so they excused me out the room because she had to tell him where certain things were. And she told him where everything was. Bishop W.W. and Deacon Aaron Matthews and Mother Nancy Matthews. And we left there, I guess, about 10 o'clock that night, and that was about 95 miles to drive back to St. Augustine. And we got the word, we got back, he had passed.
The greatest national evangelist in the history of Church of God by Faith was Overseer Nathaniel Scipio.
Scipio seemed to have been, he was the overseer, but he seemed to have had the vision for the church beyond anyone else had, to me when I was coming up, because he was the overseer, and he would always conduct the Deacons and Elders Council. But Scipio he dealt with us, on a personal basis, and yet it was broad enough to encompass all of us that were in there. And he was the one that actually had seemingly the vision to carry the church forward.
Daddy Scipio was so dynamic, because some people say, well, he preached out 23 churches. That's crazy. He preached out way more than that. And he literally built 23 churches himself. The very church in Lake Alfred. He made the bricks. He literally made the bricks themselves. They made the bricks, and he built the building. He built the pulpit furniture. The chairs still exist, which I have pictures of. I actually had the chair that he built with his own hand, which still stands today. He is really directly related to about 50 churches.
He was a man that believed in accomplishments. He believed in prosperity, and he always had. I never seen him without. And he'll teach you how to gain. In fact, he took a man by the name of Ella Fogel, and before Ella Fogel died, Ella Fogel was a millionaire. And Ella Fogel, when he came to Florida in '49, he couldn't even read or write because we had to teach him. And Ella Scipio took him and taught him, and he was a millionaire before he died. That was Ella C.M. Fogel. Then there was another boy named Larry Williams. He came here, and Ella Scipio dealt with him because these boys had the evangelistic mind. They were evangelists, and Elder Scipio was an evangelist, and so then he was able to, and he knew that this is what caused the church to grow.
Our second beloved bishop was Bishop Willie W. Matthews out of Ozark, Alabama.
Bishop W.F. Matthews appears to be an apostle to me, because he was able to touch each one of those fingers with his thumb. You know, apostle can touch each one of those gifts. He could evangelize. He was prophetic. He was a pastor. He was a teacher, and he was able to touch all of those fields. And on his last years, he really gave most of his time to evangelism, and his concern was developing young men. You know, he didn't leave us. You know, he would come by and check on and see how we were doing, and if there was necessary revival, he'd run a revival.
Bishop Matthews, he was really a person who sought my husband and I out when we got married and we moved to Washington, D.C., and a knock would be on the door, and I'd open it, and it would be Bishop standing there. He said, "I'm just trying to find you." And he always would tell us where the churches were if we went to some other place.
One thing I remember particular about Pop is that his profoundness, his just love. When he would get happy in the Lord, he would clap his hands with excitement and that joy. And you could just feel what he was experiencing when he was sharing the Word of God. And I love the fact that at 6:30 prayer service mornings, he would be there, with the saints, and always had a word of encouragement. I remember when I was ill one time, and I really thought that I was actually leaving this world. And Pop said to me, he said, "Live and let dying take care of itself."
Ruling Elder George Robinson pastored churches from South Florida to the state of New York. He was the district superintendent of Jacksonville and East Coast districts and was crucial to the development of the Church of God by Faith.
My name is Myra Wright, and I'm a member at Community Church of God by Faith. This is in Bellevue. My church was established in 1934 under Elder George Robinson, and at the time it was just Church of God by Faith. I think it was in the 70s that Elder Ludy Wright, he became pastor, and the church was moved across the railroad track to the current location now, and it was named Community Church of God by Faith because we were looking to, reach out in the community. They had a hard fight trying to get that church established, and our first bishop, Bishop Aaron, came down to help. And in Elder George Robinson's words, he said, "Oh, what a hard fight we had there," but he said God did enable him to establish a peace in Bellevue.
Elder Robinson, George Robinson, was a very, very influential man. In 1947, he was on the bishop board, and he served until maybe the early 50s.
Few men had a greater impact on the Church of God by Faith more than ruling Elder Theodore Brown. He served on many national capacities, including assistant overseer and national mission outreach. Ruling Elder Griffin Kemp served as the national moderator and district elder of the Gainesville and South Carolina districts.
I remember Elder Griffin Kemp, who was a man of faith. I remember his relationship with the church and how he just loved people. Elder Kemp was a man of faith. He was a man who was able to relate to everyone, not only children, not only the young people, but adults as well. And I am happy for the Church of God by Faith because of that. Being rooted and grounded in love and having faith. I remember when he was on his deathbed, he asked me to get him a drink of water. I was about 3 years old. Obviously, the story was told to me, but I still remember giving him that drink of water. And with that, I always pride myself on the man of faith. The saints prayed, they had faith in God, and eventually Elder Kemp said, "Let me go." And I believe he knew in his heart that if the saints continued to pray and continued to have faith, that things would be better. But I believe he had reached that milestone in his life, that he had accomplished so many great things. He had founded churches across the South Carolina district, and he knew his time was up. And the nice thing about that is that sometimes when you know that you've fulfilled your mission, you've done everything that God has required of your hands to do, then it's okay to let go and release yourself so that God can take us to the next level.
Eugene Kemp was a ruling elder eventually. He was the brother of Griffin Kemp, who was also the moderator of Church of God by Faith, who, by the way, could roar like a lion, preaching style, 10 minutes, tear the place up. In fact, they used to have night meetings at the national conventions. They would have night service, Sunday night services, and people would be packed up ready to go, and they'll make an announcement. Elder Griffin Kemp will be preaching, and everybody would change their minds and make it to that service because it wasn't going to be a sermon more than 15 minutes. And they know they were going to hear him roar like a lion. Dynamic man who died, by the way, stepping on a thumbtack. But he was a powerful, powerful man, moderator, jurisdictional leader, district elder for several districts during the early days. And during his tenure in Sumter, South Carolina for 15 years, he had the distinction of no one ever dying while he was pastor. The first person that died under his administration was him.
Assistant Overseer, Ruling Elder, and International Missionary Horace A. McKnight Sr. is the late father of Bishop James E. McKnight. He was known for managing the business affairs of the National Church.
Now, Elder McKnight, H.A., which is the bishop father, again, he was strict. He was a businessman, and he knew what he was doing. This is why his son was so eloquent in business, Bishop McKnight and also Deacon Horace McKnight, because they had a very astute father that knew what to do with business and knew how to handle people.
By Faith women have been an integral part of the building of this great body. They have supported with grace and advanced the good news with courage and conviction.
They would have prayer meeting, and the women would come to pray in the middle of the day. They have prayer meeting in the middle of the day. They were really down on that prayer. We had to pray. We had to pray. And like I say, they prayed in Lake Wales. They prayed every 12 o'clock. The women was out there praying, man, every day, you know. And so the Lord and the Lord just actually, their minds was geared to, to pleasing God in that respect. And God dealt with them people back there too.
The elders preached the gospel, but the mothers or the wives, they did the teaching. And Mother Scipio had a meeting every time we was in Ocala, talking to the women about how to dress, what to choose, how you should look. And one thing I thought was so important, and it's with me today, is that she said, even when you go into the store, you dress as becoming saints. So people can look at you and see God.
Ella Thomas and Mother Thomas, at the church known now as Thomas Chapel. Okay. Mother Thomas and Ella Thomas didn't have any children at all. And a matter of fact, it was no children attending the church. So my mother, Mabel King, said, this is the right place for my children to go. Nobody there but those old folks. Now that's how she put it. Okay, so mother sent us there. John, my brother, Josephine, and Betty, and myself, the four. We went there to that church, and Mother Thomas loved me so much because she didn't have any children. So she taken us 4 children as her children. 5th Sunday meetings, she would tell us to get ready, we going. But you know what? On Fridays, Mother Thomas would say, come on over, children. She would teach us how to sew, how to crochet, how to knit, even cook.
During the time, the first secretary of the Church of God by Faith business office was Sister Katie Hill. She later married to Deacon Otis Jefferson, and Deacon Otis Jefferson is presently working with our National Finance Board for the Church of God by Faith. But we had a good time, a splendid time there at the church, getting to know everyone. Deacon Aaron Matthews' wife, Leola Matthews, we used to visit her periodically, and during that time, around the 70s, I was called into the military, and I had to go to Vietnam, and Leola Matthews cooked me a cake and shipped it to Vietnam. And I was proud to note of her concern and love that she had for me.
Once the charter was established in 1922, the Church of God by Faith was blessed with many spectacular leaders who served with great distinction.
Shortly after the Church of God by Faith came into existence, my grandfather, the elder William Davis, and my grandmother, Mother Mattie Davis, became members of the Church of God by Faith and worked closely with the founding fathers, Elder Bright, Elder John Bright, Bishop Aaron Matthews, Elder Nathaniel, Scipio, Elder Stedman. They worked closely with them, and so much is so that they built a church in Hastings right next door to our house.
My mom was 41 years teacher, adult teacher at Sanderson. My father was the chairman of the deacon board. They was there when the church first started in 1930. Elder John Henry Reed came out just looking for some place to worship. But he was a member of the Church of God in Christ at that particular time, and that was in the late 20s. And he and another lady was there, and they heard about the Church of God by Faith over in Alachua County, which he's from. And he mentioned that, and while he was gone, Mother White by name, Mother Rosie Givens, Mother Estelle Page, and they standing around a tree one day, and they say, oh, the Church of God by Faith sounds good. It sounds good. They didn't want to join the other Pentecostal church that was there, but they kind of formed a little thing there, and they got permission when they was not having church over there to start having prayer meeting in their building. And from there, they started just worshiping up from house to house. And then Elder Scipio heard about it. Elder Scipio came out and built a bush harbor right across the street from my parents' house, which hold about 7 or 8 people. And that's where they got started, right there. And from then, from 1931 up until 1935, that's where they worshiped, in the bush harbor, with no walls around it or nothing. And in 1935, they built where we are present now.
Mitchell Stoops, who was from South Carolina. Eugene Kemp was a ruling elder eventually. He was the brother of Griffin Kemp, who was also the moderator of Church of God by Faith. So anyway, this man and his brother They started going to Rochester and building because Griffin Crimp's wife was Daisy. They had sons and daughters who lived in Rochester. As a result, that's how the church got started there. But Elder Kemp was not the first pastor. There was another guy who was a pastor. Then there was E.J. Lewis. Eventually, it became Elder Kemp, Eugene Kemp. He pastored. My grandfather came in early. He was a deacon, David H. Hurd, and he started out with him and started a church in Syracuse. That's how Rochester became a district from Syracuse Church starting. Who I had not a clue. He started it in 1954. I had not a clue. I grew up going to that church as a kid in my dad's car as he was the superintendent years later. Had no clue that one day I'll end up the pastor of that church.
For any church to survive over 100 years, there must be good leadership and effective administration.
See, in those days, apparently the ruling elders did stay on there very long on the bishop board. Some of them stayed longer than others. Some stayed a couple of years. Some stayed maybe 5 or 6 years. Some stayed as much as 10 or 15 years. And this is why they had such turnover there with the ruling elders. But they had Ella Roger, Ella George Robinson, Ella H.A. McKnight, Ella Griffin Kemp. They had, a lot of on that board from time to time.
That's quite a transition to be a ruling elder and then become a superintendent of a district.
And then from superintendent to pastor.
Dix, Johnson, Joseph Camps, Herbert Green for the first board that we had of examining elders that went through a teaching course, because otherwise when we were ordained we didn't have to go through a teaching course. We just came in because we were called of God to preach, and they asked us whether we run about stuff, some of that nature. But then I developed materials that they're still using, I think. Now, yeah, I'm sure they are. And we taught men the ministry from the bottom, you might say. I say it like that, so they might be better qualified to do the job they were called to. At Deacons and Elders Councils, I was usually the secretary back there at the Deacons and Elders Councils, and I would write down everything Elder Scipio would say. I mean, I would write it down in there, because we used to have it wasn't rituals. It was in a way, it was a manuscript of what we had accomplished in a meeting like this, and whatever we said in that meeting, then they would print it up and they would give it to the churches, to see what actually happened.
The Spiritual Guide was a publication that Deacon Aaron Matthews was in charge of, and what they did, they collected information from all of the districts throughout the Church of God by Faith, if they were running meetings, or they had something special, or if they had a revival, or anything special that they would like to put in the Spiritual Guide, they would consult him. And at the printing press over on Haines Street, Deacon Aaron Matthews used to prepare that and made sure that all the churches get a copy of it. And this was their vehicle to keep them up to date with all of the church activities and everything that were going. Even the meetings, giving you a time, date, and the events that were happening in Ocala during our national meetings. The Spiritual Guide would cover all of that material as well.
At the church convention in Ocala, Florida, December meeting, that's what we would call it, the December meeting, they elected me as superintendent of the Sunday school. And I said, being a young person, I can do it. But I looked around and I said, there's a lots of need to be improved in this place. And I need to work real fast, because we need auxiliaries, church auxiliaries. Everybody need to be on the same Sunday school format. And I knew that. I visit overseer in Scipio, Nathaniel Scipio. and his wife at their home. And I can remember so well when Daddy Scipio said to me, and let me quote it, "Dog, if you can start a Sunday school convention without the church financing or giving you any money, you have our permission." I started collecting money. I said, now this is the way I'm going to do it. I said, if I get a sponsor book and collect money, I said, that's going to bring in my revenues. So each page was $100. A half a page was $50. 1/4 page was $25. So that's big bucks during that time, 1967. So I said, now the next thing I need to do is to write the different companies, church companies, to get literature. So I did. The first Sunday school convention started in Jacksonville, Florida, and we didn't serve food at the first one. Now they might have, after we started doing the Christian Board of Education, we probably had the food and had places, facilities for them, but we didn't start in the beginning. In 1967, we didn't start it like that. So I selected a place in Jacksonville, Florida for the Sunday school convention. During that time, it was a group of five, the big group of five, and the big group of five consists of Joyce, Edmund, Bobby Wharton, Sister Jessie Bell, Gatson Gates, and then the last one was Belinda King Presley, and myself. So that made the big five. The Christian Board of Education came about by somebody being advanced. I remember that meeting we talked about the Sunday school convention need to be broader, go a little further than what we were doing it.
Yes. So as a result of the Sunday school convention, there was an
birthed the idea of the Christian Board of Education. It came from the Sunday school convention. Mm-hmm.
Churches have personality. This one lived by faith and the beauty of holiness.
We as kids had to live as if though we were saved. We couldn't do anything that the saved people couldn't do, the children could not do it. And I can name out some of the things that, even when I went to high school, I couldn't play physical education. I sat over under the bush while they played. We had to live like Mom and Dad lived. And that was a requirement. If they said no sodas, no this, we couldn't drink sodas either. No gum, we couldn't chew gum either. If they didn't shoot marbles, we couldn't shoot marbles. If they didn't play ball, we couldn't do it. That's just how strict it was. And we learned to live that way. We thought that was the way to live.
The women and men were taught modesty in dress and appearance from the very beginning of the church.
Right. Elders didn't wear ties. Elder Scipio, Elder Stedman, Elder Bright, Bishop Aaron Matthews didn't wear ties. Now, my daddy, Deacon Cleve Roberts Sr., before he got saved and came into the church, he used to wear ties. But when he came into the church and he saw those elders not wearing ties, he said, well, I'm not wearing, and Daddy did not wear a tie. Mm-hmm. However, I wore a tie because time changed. Mm-hmm. I wore ties, but he did not wear a tie. They use those little clips up there. Mm-hmm. You may see a few of the men, just a few, very few of them that do that now. Most of them are wearing ties now. Mm-hmm. But that was one of the things. They didn't wear ties. And it was a thing. They were very modest. I remember Mom and Grandma used to send me up to the store to get their stockings. They called these red fox, I believe what they were. They had the seam that ran up the back. They had stockings on. You knew they had stockings on because you could see the seam and you couldn't see no flesh. Mm-hmm. And many times the dresses were long, okay? And they didn't go to what they call a hairdresser. No, they didn't do that. That was natural. And that's how they wore it.
Well, Mother Scipio used to say dresses becoming saints. And she would always teach that. You have to dress to cover the uncommon parts of your body. And so dresses had to be not a certain length, but below your knees, so when you sat down, you looked presentable. And they didn't have dresses with openness in the front, not too tight, but they dressed well. And so she was a perfect example of how you should look. And then Sister Naomi, who was my cousin, she was also a great example because she epitomized what Mother Scipio was saying. And I learned from them because I lived right across the street from her and her sister, so I was in their house a lot.
I remember I had a cousin who was 19, and she influenced me to wear a dress that by the world standard, it was old-fashioned, but by the church standards, it was a no-no. And it was a two-piece outfit with the jacket had a short sleeve, and the skirt was to my knees. And when I walked in the church, I fully expected to be noticed and maybe reprimanded, but I sat on the back seat. So Ella Robinson called us up front, and he made us sit on the front row. And we sat there and we pulled and we pulled and we tried to pull more inches into that garment than there was to be pulled.
And a lot of people at that time didn't think young girls could go to college and stay saved. So my objective was, I was going to go to Bethune-Cookman College. I was going to be saved when I got there, and I was going to be saved when I left. And I did.
The Church of God by Faith was built on faith. Whenever someone took ill or needed any type of miracle from God, they simply called on the elders of the church and were made whole. Prayer meetings are the integral part of the church that has blessed and sustained this great body over time.
They taught us on Sunday, we might be in church from 10:30 to 2 or 3 o'clock, 3:30, 4 o'clock sometimes. They would take a chapter of a book, a New Testament beyond Acts, and they would go through that chapter and they would stay there until they went through that chapter, that one chapter. Everybody would know what was being said from every verse, and he might call on the deacon to read that verse and tell him what it means, and if he couldn't, then he would explain it, the pastor would explain it. That's the way we was brought up. We weren't brought up with no preaching like the hoop now. No, it wasn't no hoop, it was teaching. And this is what the word, see, I'll say it this way, we were taught that faith come out here and hear by the word of God. Without faith it is impossible to please him. How can you hear without the preacher? And how can he preach except he be sent? So if he wasn't a sent man, he couldn't actually preach faith. And this is what we needed to please God.
In those days they didn't have telephones, but they sent word and tell Elder so-and-so that my son is hurting, whatever. And if they say they're going to be all right, we got all right. And we live in a time when olive oil was our only medicine in the house. There was no BCs, no nothing. And they would not give you a drink of water if they thought that would heal you, because they said that would be used as a remedy. But those were the days, and the church was very, very strong, very strong. I remember that I had a hearing problem, and Elder John Henry Reed, he told me, he said, boy, don't lie to me. Don't lie to me. He said, you won't get healed. And he touched my ear, and then I went on. I even entered in the service. So if I had a hearing problem, I never would have got in the service. I got healed.
I love the stories that I've heard about our leaders. They didn't give any place to the devil. If you had the nerve to say, I've got a headache, or that there was an ailment, you might think you were ignored if they didn't make a comment about that. They might say you'll be all right, or they might not say anything, but you would get well, because the devil didn't get an inch. He didn't get a toehold. He didn't get anything in their lives.
We didn't know nothing about cancer, man, and sugar diabetes and high blood pressure back there. No, it wasn't even, I ain't know about that kind of stuff, man. And then these people come up with all this kind of funny stuff. It wasn't in the church, And if somebody got sick, if they did get sick, they called for the elder of the church and they prayed for him. Prayer of faith was prayed, and the people was right back up, doing whatever they had to do.
I never went to the doctor when I was a little girl. They never took me to the doctor. And I would have measles, whooping cough, you name it. And they had olive oil They pray for you, anoint you with olive oil, and say, you are going to be all right. And I was all right. And I didn't have the faith, but my aunt and my mom, children don't know that. They had the faith and believed for me. Because they say when you're sick, you don't have faith to believe. Someone else has to do that. So I never went to the doctor until I was an adult. But
I remember my mom told a story one time that she must have had laryngitis. She was very sick. And she loved to be around my great aunt that took me in from the time I was born. She wanted something better for me, and that's why I lived with her, and she took me into the church. But my mom would hang around her. And so one day Mama was just laying around, and Elder Lee Brewer, a powerful man of faith, came by, he and his wife, and they didn't get out the car. And they looked at my mom lying there, and they said, what's wrong with her? I think she was on the porch. And they said, oh, she's sick. And so they didn't acknowledge that. They just kept talking. And so when they were ready to leave, they said, well, how you doing now? And my mom spoke. She said, I'm fine. And she just got up and she was healed and she went home. And that's the way it was back then.
There were cases where a man cut his finger off at the sawmill and brought it to Ella Boone. And Ella Boone just put his finger back on there and told him to go back to work. These are kind of miracles that were wrought.
At the National Convention, I remember a friend of mine whose babies were ill, and Elder Root received one, and Elder Evans, the other one, prayed with them, and when they handed them back to us, the fever was gone and the babies were healed.
Grandfather, Elder William Davis, was pastoring in Crescent City, Florida. That's on the Palaca district now. It was Ocala then during that time. He was driving this little truck. He made it out of T-model, made it into a little truck. And he was driving, and they didn't have fences up separating the forest from the roads. Old cow came out there stumbling across the road, and Grandpa hit the cow and knocked the cow down. And Mother Mattie, his wife, said, "Oh my Lord," she called him, "William, them people gonna put you in jail. You done kill those people cows." Grandpa stopped the truck, got his oil, always kept some olive oil with him. He came out, knelt down, anointed the cow with oil. And the cow got up and wobbled a little bit and moved and took off running. Now that's the faith, and that's the power of prayer. And he went on and had church.
During the early days of By Faith, the church was the center of everyday life. If members were in need of food, healing, or even burial, the church helped meet those needs. Most members worked very hard to sustain life, but they still pooled together their resources and they shared whatever they had to meet each other's needs.
We would go to Jacksonville Beach. Mom would would get the bus from Sanderson, go down and spend time with Mother Thomas and Noel, and we come back. And my father was about the only one that had, in those days, a truck at the church there. And he would work with the truck all the week, and we would clean that truck up and go to the Fifth Sunday meeting, put a tarp over the back of it and put chairs in there, and that's when he would haul the saints around from church to church.
Even during our district assemblies, we used to meet from church to church. We used to eat out of the trunk of automobiles, and each of the members just served their food to whosoever would like to come and have some. They were very friendly, outgoing, and they shared and loved one another.
At that time, we was no stationary place on the district to have a district meeting.
In Ocala, they had a two-story building where they had the dining room downstairs, and the kitchen, and the men slept up above there. They had rooms up there.
If you didn't have your wife with you, then the men lived upstairs in that lobby at night. And we ate, everybody ate downstairs, and the food was prepared by Deacon Veal and his staff. But if you had a wife and you want to stay with your wife and children, then you would have to choose one of those homes to go to. But if you was just single there, all the men stayed upstairs at the lobby there. And your meals was 10 cents a day. Sister Elizabeth Harris and her father was in charge of the tickets. Had a little roll of tickets. You pay them 10 cents and you go inside and eat, and everybody just sit down to a table. At that time, as the Army used it, mess hall. Just lined up tables and everybody just get in there and eat.
When a tragedy occurred in the Church of God by Faith family, it affected everyone across the national church.
My mom was 41 years teacher, adult teacher at Sanderson. My father was the chairman of the deacon board. And October 1975, 13th day of October, my father and mother, aunt and uncle was on their way back from this funeral. They was driving LTD at that time. That was a big Ford, and they made it as far as Orange Lake and 441, and it was struck by a big truck. And this truck just went on top and brought them down 12 inches with 4 people in it, and that was it. Elder Roger, I would say, was one of the most progressive in that day.
Yeah, he seemed like he was very attentive to the word that he brought forth to the people, to make sure that they understood the things that he was trying to get forth, and seemed like he captured the attention of everyone that wanted to listen. And he was just spreading the gospel, spreading the word, and the people were edified.
Elder Walter Roger was very much like our first bishop, very common, very friendly, and he had a great interest in his pastors and his ministers.
Elder Rozier was married to Mother Ruby Rozier.
Again, as long as she's been with us, and as many times as we've been in all the meetings, very seldom you heard her say anything. She was very quiet and very sweet. She kind of had it down low there, but she was very, very sweet. And she had one daughter named Judy, which they all was killed in the same accident. And Elder Benny Summers from Ocala. They were coming back from Georgia. And it happened almost where my parents' accident was. They both were. My parents was in Marion County, and they happened in Alachua County, and it was on the way back to Ocala. So they stopped to get gas or something, and they got on the wrong when they should have been going south. On the south lane, they got in the northbound lane going south, and I think it's 4 in one car got killed and 4 in the other car got killed. 3 died immediately in the other car that head on, and the day of the funeral of the Rogers and the Summers, the other person died.
Our beloved presiding Bishop James E. McKnight Sr. has served on the national level for over 50 years. He was recently honored with these words.
Bishop. I thank God for you and Mother because one of the times you were there for me. I thank God for the both of you all.
This is when I was in Atlanta for the convention, and I left my husband with my sister. He was so very sick. He was on oxygen 24/7. But I went on to the convention, and on that Saturday evening, I never will forget, I told Bishop, I said, Bishop, I think it's time for me to go back and see about my husband. And he grabbed my hand and he prayed, and when he prayed, the power of God hit him. And he said these words, he said, it's all right. And let me tell you something, when I got back to Gainesville, where I left my husband on oxygen, he walked out of the house with no oxygen.
May God renew your strength like that of an eagle, that you may run and not get weary, walk and not faint.
Like Moses, let your eyes not grow dim. In order to write the vision and make it plain, let all the children sing.
We bless you in the name of Jesus.
God bless you, Bishop. After 60 years, you done dealt with all kind of cantankerous folks. You done dealt with all kind of people. But after 60 years, you're still standing. Got a good, pretty wife standing by your side. God bless you, Bishop. The power of purpose is behind you. Don't worry about tomorrow. God got you in the palm of his hand. I love you. May God's grace forever keep you. In Jesus' name.
Oh, how sweet it is to sample just a few of the many who committed their lives to the Church of God by faith. Oh, the courage to engage the unfamiliar with a fresh word in spite of the risk to life and limb. Oh, the trust to apply faith to things unseen, illnesses undiagnosed, money unattainable, and food unavailable. It was and is that substance of things hoped for that has driven the great men and women of the Church of God by faith as they did and are doing the work of the Lord.
But we have a doctrine, we have a good foundation, next to nothing, next to none out there. There's no foundation better than what we have. I believe that.
One of the things that I remember about Church of God by Faith is the love factor. Everyone had an opportunity to share and give of their resources and to love each other. If one person did not have, the church rallied together to make something happen for someone.
Being Church of God by Faith is being Jesus to me. It means that much to me. It means my salvation. It means when the Lord come back, I will be ready. So I want my church to, when I represent Church of God by Faith, I want to represent it as a ready church.
I'm glad to have been born into my family and the Church of God by Faith family, because that's what I know and that's what I am proud of. And I'm blessed to have been born in the by faith family.
Because of the type leaders that we had, the younger ministers, the younger deacons, because of the type ministers, the type leaders that we had, I think they have to thank the Lord because they trotted the water. They went through a lot of stuff to get to where we are today. And because of their standing on what they believe, walking from East Jacksonville all the way to Jacks Heights and getting back home 3 o'clock in the morning just to try to get somebody saved, I think that's noteworthy. And I think that they left some really big footprints for everybody to follow.
Stability is the mantra of this great church, with only 3 bishops across 100 years without a church split. Faithfulness is the creed within imperfect lovers with perfect hearts, daring to live right in an unrighteous world. Yes, lovers, because they love the Lord in and out of season with a spiritual fidelity that has stood the test of time. And as they gathered in 1922 to scribble out the direction future leaders should go, they established a path that remains clear. This is the church that exists by faith. And as preparations are being laid to embrace the future, we pray for our leaders and commit to carrying out our load in this great tradition.
I hope that there will be a special, unified heart and mind of every individual that we can continually work together. And I just admonish elders, ministers, deacon brethren, the entire congregation that we lift our heads continually and hold fast to that which we have been taught, that the church will move in a great way toward the very perfection of the saints of God in Christ Jesus.